Hey everyone, this is Julie B. And I just got off of basically a conference call with Senator Marco Rubio from Florida, Senator Ben Cardin from Maryland, and the CEO of Goldman Sachs, David Solomon. Now, I was offered this spot on this conference call through the 10,000 Small Businesses program that Goldman Sachs offers and that I did last fall. So the point of this call was to discuss the new CARES Act for COVID-19 response and how that act is going to impact small businesses, specifically small businesses with 500 employees or fewer. Now, I will first say I was actually really surprised by how well tuned in Senators Rubio and Cardin were to the needs of small businesses. Some of the things they said really were very insightful and very true to really small businesses like mine, where we have 2 employees and myself. So I was actually really happy to hear how tuned in they actually were. And so what I want to go over right now is just a few highlights of the act. Now, I'm not going to hit the topics that you can read about on SBA.gov or other small business resources. I was listening for things that I hadn't read about. I've read quite a bit about this CARES Act over the weekend, and I wanted to try to find things that that really weren't mentioned in some of the things that I had read about. Okay, so I'm reading from a notebook, so just bear with me here. So the first thing, and probably one of the most important things, is what one of the senators said was there is absolutely no reason for a bank to not do this loan, because there's no underwriting, there's very little in terms of like credit checking, and it's basically self-reporting by the small business owner. So, and on top of that, the banks, from my understanding, are getting some type of incentive, some type of obviously money to write these loans. And if the loans are used for payroll, mortgage, rent, utilities, those types of things, it's 100% backed by the government. So there's first and foremost, there's absolutely no reason, kind of probably no matter what your personal financial situation is, that a bank wouldn't lend to you. And based on my understanding, they are going to lend up to basically 2.5 times your monthly payroll, or 250% of your monthly payroll. So that is a number you're going to want to have when you go in to get this loan. That's really important. And kind of the flip side of that is, the second most important thing, I think, is that you make sure, however you use this loan, if you get it, you keep proof of how it is being used. Because if it's used for certain things like payroll and rent payments and mortgage payments and that type of thing, then it is actually going to be 100% forgiven, or whatever portion you use for those approved expenses. One of the other things they said that I think is really important is they are monitoring how this is all playing out. Talks of extending this program were mentioned. And really, basically what they said, what that looks like is they just have to find the money for it. If we get, a month down the road and it looks like this is going to go on longer and small businesses are going to need more money, there are talks of potentially extending the amount that you can borrow for payroll. So while, 2.5 months doesn't seem like that long of a time, it will go by quickly. And I think I was really actually relieved to hear that, because I could see some companies and some small businesses that I know, the impact of this is going to extend beyond 2.5 months from now. So I think it's important to know that they are already talking about potentially needing to extend this program. The other thing I thought was really interesting is that the lenders have been approved to, or maybe that's not the right phrasing, but there's, you can have the opportunity to get a $10,000 grant right away, and this does not have to be paid back. So what they're talking about with that is funding within 3 days of actually applying through your lender for that specific grant. Now, that grant money would come off of any potential CARES Act loan amount you might get, but if you need money right now to keep your people employed or to pay rent or whatever it may be, there is money coming for that, and it sounds like you'll be able to get at least a small amount of whatever the total loan might be fairly quickly. One thing I think that's really important also to mention, another point, was we talked about the payroll tax reductions, and there are a lot of rules around that. I would recommend reaching out to your CPA or your payroll tax company or your payroll company to ask them further details on that, because I'm certainly not going to give you the clearest overview here. But from my understanding, you can't do that program and then do the CARES Act, or basically the senators kept saying that the funds, you can't get funding from two different programs to pay for the same thing. So as you're doing this, just keep that in mind. If you're getting a funding, if you're, for example, did the economic disaster loan application and you get funding there, then that's going to impact what you can get through the CARES Act. So make sure you get educated on that a little bit further, and just be aware that approval and funding from one place might impact your approval or funding, or the way you can use certain funds from another funding program. So just to recap, number one, there is very little reason why a bank would not lend to a small business right now through the CARES Act, so keep that in mind. Number two, you're going to want to keep really good records of how you spend any money that is lended to you right now, so that you can maximize the loan forgiveness programs that are going to be rolling around in about a year from now. Number three, there could be extensions that come out if we get down the line here a little bit further and find that the 2.5 times your monthly payroll isn't enough, or if this COVID-19 extends even further. So just keep that in mind. I've already heard some small businesses saying 2.5 times monthly payroll isn't enough. Just keep it in mind that there may be extensions. Number four, if you need money quickly, remember that there is the grant program where you can get up to $10,000 within 3 days. Keep that in mind. Ask your banker about that if you need help with that. Also be aware of how, number five, you need to make sure that if you're applying for other programs, you understand how they work together, because that may impact your loan forgiveness down the line. The payroll tax regulations that are coming out to help small businesses, that might impact or prevent you from getting other types of financing or other types of support. So just keep that in mind. Check in with your CPAs and your payroll company if you're wondering about that specific rule. And then, I think the biggest takeaway here is that they reiterated this over and over again, that there is no reason why a bank wouldn't loan you the money. These loans are 100% backed by the government, so there's really not a lot of risk for the banks to lend this money. The reason the government is going to the banks to facilitate these loans is banks have the resources they need to process a large number of loans quickly. So I hope this was helpful. I would say, check in with your local SBA office. I am certainly not an expert on this, but I felt it was a good thing to kind of give you the overview that I got from the call with the senators today. And it was really helpful and really eye-opening for me. So I'm sure it will be helpful, or at least I hope it will be helpful to some of you. Thank you for watching.